So following on from that, I help people to work together more effectively, to be creative, to do great things by sheer chance. Work for a company called Preselli. So I'm talking about frontal lobes and opposable thumbs, which are the things that most separate us from our closest relatives as a species. Just show me your opposable thumbs just quickly. Great, I'm doing really well. Another way you could look at opposable thumbs is to think like the Italian. Right? Perché? It's, if your thumb can touch all the pads of your fingers, you have an opposable thumb. Monkeys can't do that. Their thumb would get in the way if they grabbed a branch, if it was like that. It needs to be a little shorter. Yeah, that opposable thumb allows us to do all kinds of little manipulation and things. The other big difference is the frontal lobe. This skull in the top right is the human skull. We've got this really high forehead, and that's the part that houses the frontal lobe. Now, I know absolutely nothing about brains, just like I know nothing about computers, but I do know how to use the programs within them. And this frontal lobe is the bit which helps us with regards to what's called executive function. So this is kind of having a think about the future, making a decision about what's going to work most effectively, and making decisions about how to move forward from there. So that's the frontal lobe, and you can see the monkey quite simply doesn't happen. Now, this is why this picture is so ridiculous, is because the monkey can't hold the pen properly, nor can it make five-year financial forecasts or deal with a management buyout. In fact, that kind of takeover would yield a response in the gorilla or the ape that was much more along, well, these kinds of lines. This is a chimpanzee, and chimpanzee and the bonobo are our closest relatives. Chimpanzee reacts to these kinds of complex scenarios with aggression. It fights things off. And the bonobo does things in a slightly different kind of way. The bonobo's all, well, it's a complete hippie, really. The bonobo's all about make love and not war. There's a bonobo. The way that the bonobo deals with things is through play. They play together. And and if that doesn't work, they tend to have sex. Well, the women control the men with the sex. That's the way they do things. So it's a completely different approach to, well, it's a matriarchal society, apparently. We do things very differently. When we dealt with an aggressive kind of environment, the idea is that we use the frontal lobe to kind of plan ahead and think about, well, if we do this, how's that going to affect things? If I do that, how's that going to do things? And so we kind of get an impression about what our behaviors would kind of, how that would affect our situation. If we don't have a frontal lobe, or rather if it's been damaged in some ways, we tend to have this wildly inappropriate behavior. We don't know what to do in a certain situation. We can't plan ahead because we're not kind of thinking into the future. So if we've got this frontal lobe, for me, it's all about how can we use that with our thumbs to do great things. And I think it's a big difference in creative people. You know, creative people dream a lot, come up with these amazing ideas. What's the difference between someone who's coming up with all these amazing ideas and somebody who can actually make those ideas happen? Someone like Nikola Tesla, you know, an incredible innovator. And Nikola Tesla had this immense capacity for, well, he could build the components of a machine in his head and then put them together. Seem to have stuck. Put them together in such a way that they could actually build another machine. Ah, he was there. To build another machine and actually test it and run it without ever actually building the machine in the first place. So he managed to jump really far ahead. And I think that's to do with being connected to the here and now. It's about being able to recognize what the resources we have are available to us and plan ahead accordingly. Now, here, I've got an idea of where I want to be, for instance, or where I wanted to be tonight was here with you guys. Now, Google Maps asks me for where I am right now. Without that information, it cannot give, in fact, every direction it gives me will be wrong. It's the same with the frontal lobe. Unless you've got a clear perception of the here and now, you can't come up with solutions to help move you forward into the future. So for me, when dealing with a complex stakeholder scenario, or lots of interdisciplinary, you know, people. It's about understanding those people. Not only those people are where you want them to be, but also understanding where they are right now and the direction that they're going in. Because you might think they're all heading beautifully to arrive at this wonderful place to make your idea happen, but as Simon will tell you, they're probably heading in a different direction. And you've got to work with that. And if you can understand their trajectory, you can help kind of steer them to get them to where you would like them to be. Understanding what's actually motivating them is also important. Here we've got a sense of resources. I know the stuff that I've got influences what I can do. And if you've got, if you consider what you've got as a resource, you tend to factor it in when you're trying to come up with different strategies. Otherwise, you forget you've got a queen on your chessboard. It's the same for all the people that you're trying to work with as well. What they know and what they don't know. What they don't know, they don't know. What they know, they don't know. What they know, they know. All these things influence things. I know that, if I don't know something, I'm certainly not going to do anything about it, So it's about trying to understand that intel as well. I mentioned about what's important to them. If you can understand their priorities and keep up to date with when those priorities change, this is about values, you can work to steer them in a little bit more effectively and ensure they get the best out of the project that you're looking to work with. So trajectory, resources, intel, values all help you with empathy, the ability to step into another person's shoes and learn to walk in them. And if you can do that, when you're developing your idea, you're going to find that the connections that you make with using your frontal lobe are going to be far more plentiful, far more fruitful. And those connections are all about how the brain works. It's about ensuring that your brain's connecting with them. And all these connections in just one here and now moment in this beautiful thing called the brain of a fruit fly. And I hope we've made some new connections tonight. Thank you very much.